Welcome to the channel. My name is Lisa. I hope you're having a good day. This channel is designed to help you improve your English communication skills. If English is not your first language, then you're in the right place. We have to remember improving communication is not just about vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation. It is also about culture. So today we're going to talk about the American culture in the workplace, values and behaviors. Why do we need to talk about this? Well, if you're thinking of moving to the United States, or maybe you're in the United States and you want to move to a different job, maybe you've improved your English, you want another job. Sometimes students are surprised at what they find when they start working because they didn't take the time to really examine how Americans communicate and what their behaviors are like. And so I don't want you to be surprised. Let's go over some common values and behaviors. Remember, this doesn't mean every single American will behave this way. It's just a guide. Some people will fall into some of these behaviors, others will not, but just to give you an idea. So let's look at the first one. We're going to talk about individualism. Well, what is that, individualism? Many Americans value independence, self-reliance, and personal freedom. They believe in being yourself. So many Americans do prefer to work alone, to be left alone, to do their own thing. They don't mind being told what to do, but they don't like being told how to do it. So this is something that you can expect on the workforce. Let's look at the next one. Being informal. And this has its challenges. If you come from a culture where it's very formal at work, where you use, sir or ma'am, Mr., Mrs., this is not the case typically at an American workplace. Because they believe in equality, Americans often treat everyone in an informal manner, whatever their social position. So it's very common to meet a CEO of a company, and you might want to say, Mr. or Mrs. CEO. Perhaps this woman is a CEO of her company. We wouldn't typically say, Mrs. Mary Smith, how are you today? We might say, hi, Mary, how are you today? So even CEOs or bosses of companies they would rather use their first name than using a formal title or their first and last name. So I want you to understand this point because many students struggle with this. They come into this culture and they're very formal when they have conversations with people, especially those that have positions that are higher than them. And it's not the case in the American culture. We get very informal very quickly. So don't be surprised by this and watch your emails. Of course, writing emails is a lesson for another time. But I notice in student emails, business emails especially, you're very formal. So just be careful. We get very informal very quickly, and that is allowed. That's okay in the American culture. So let's look at our next value that we're going to talk about, and that's privacy. Many Americans value their own private space and their possessions. They expect to have time to process things on their own, do things on their own, and they assume that other people also need this alone time. So with their things or their possessions, it's pretty common for Americans not wanting you to touch their things unless they give you permission, even if you worked with them for a long time. You might come from a culture where this is normal. If you need a pen, you just grab a pen off your coworker's desk or their stapler. Just be careful with this. It's usually not allowed, borrowing things, taking things from your coworkers without them knowing, even if you know them well. And this happened to me. I worked for a company in the office and I ordered this really nice pen and it wasn't cheap. And one of my coworkers came in that works on the road, came to my desk to sign something and accidentally took my pen. She didn't mean to steal it. It wasn't stealing. She just didn't realize she put it in her bag. I was looking for that pen for like 2 weeks. I had to order another one. And then a couple weeks later, she comes to my desk again to sign something and she's using my pen. I was like, hey, that's my pen. So she wasn't trying to steal it, but that's how we feel working in the American culture, like that's mine. So it's very common for people to label things, put their name on things, their chair, their stapler, it's mine. So don't feel offended if people, put their names on things or they don't want you to touch their desk. It's pretty common behavior in the American culture. So let's look at the next behavior or value, and that is competition. The American workplace can be pretty competitive. And since they sometimes judge themselves and others by their accomplishments, Americans tend to value winning over doing their best. They want to win. So it's just a cultural mindset. They often want to distinguish or make themselves different in a good way above other people. And they like their achievements to be recognized. They want recognition. So be ready for an environment of competition. You might come from a culture where this isn't the case, where maybe everybody helps each other and it's not as competitive, but it is. Maybe you come from a culture that is very competitive, so you'll understand this idea of competition. Let's look at the next value or behavior, and that's being direct or assertive. And this can scare some students if you come from a culture where you're not direct. So Americans sometimes prioritize or put in the number one spot being honest over respecting people's feelings. So they might be very honest and direct, and they're not worrying about your feelings. They often expect you to express your opinion also. And then when Americans disagree, to solve a disagreement or an argument, they will be very direct with you. So there are some cultures where it's not polite to be direct, but in the American culture, it's expected. So let's look at our last value or behavior. So for this one, think about your last job and maybe you wanted to work your way up or into a different position. So the last one that we're going to talk about is personal progress. And again, this is connected to competition. So you do have to remember that Americans see change in a good way. They expect to look and grab new opportunities. They look for and grab new opportunities with their work. So it's very common to go from one job to another. And there's some students who come from a culture where this is not common, where you stay at a job for many, many years and they come here to the US and they're really shocked to know how many jobs somebody had or how easily you can move from one job to another. Just as an example, I had a student who came from a culture where you couldn't leave very easily, even legally. You had to give the company 1 month notice. Maybe you come from a culture like that. Here, typically in the US, 2 weeks is just as a courtesy. It's not legally required unless you have a contract. So I'm not talking about jobs that have contracts. I'm talking about jobs where you don't have a contract, you didn't sign a contract. And by law, you can legally leave the next day. I gave a job 1 day notice at one point. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily what you want to do or it's the right thing to do. It's just that you have different legal rights here in the US compared to other countries. And it's pretty easy to move from job to job. So very common for people to have multiple jobs. So you have to think of it as if you want to move up or you want a different job, it doesn't mean it's in the same company. Moving up means moving to another job, to another job, to another job. So just keep that in mind. That could be very different in your own culture. So hopefully this helps if you're thinking of getting another job, a better job. Maybe now you're working remotely, you're working with some Americans, or there's an international team, and you have to treat each person a little bit differently in how you communicate with them. So we will talk more about that in another video because there are differences in culture, and we will mention some specific countries as to how they communicate and why that makes a difference. If you have any video ideas, if you want to ask me any questions, or you'd like me to do a lesson on a particular grammar point, pronunciation point, vocabulary point, or you can put your idea in the comments and I'll put it on the list. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy your day.